Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. Thank you everybody that left questions on my Game of Thrones bonus video this week. A lot of people excited about A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, and some of you have actually read it before. I think there's a version that was also released internationally early, so some of you have already seen it and bought it. I was a little surprised at how many people had never heard of it before, but George R. R. Martin actually has several short stories and other non-Song of Ice and Fire books that he's written before. In fact, one of the questions I actually picked out was about the Ice Dragon, the story that he wrote, which is way before he wrote Song of Ice and Fire. So here we go. Just careful for spoilers from the TV show if you're not caught up with season 5 yet. Here we go. First question, Grimace asks, I thought the release was going to be graphic novels all brought into one book. Is it just going to be the literary version of the story? So you're talking about the Dunk and Egg stories. Yeah, it's just going to be the collected short stories. It's not going to be the comic book. I haven't seen anything recently, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do more Game of Thrones based comic books though in the future. Next question, Anthony asks, who do you think that Elijah Wood could play in the Game of Thrones universe? Well, I actually, he'd have to play a bigger character because he's a fairly notable actor, so it'd be weird to see him playing some offhanded character. I think if they were to do Aegon from the books, they kind of cut him out of the show, he would totally be good for that. He looks like somebody who could be a serious candidate for the Iron Throne, but since it seems like they're not doing that book plot on the show, that it's just complete fantasy. I know a lot of people might think that he'd be a good Jon Snow too, but he seems a little too earnest, a little too soft. But you guys can let me know. Elijah Wood, Game of Thrones, who's he playing? Next question, Adam asks, has George R. R. Martin finished writing the Dunk and Egg stories, and will the upcoming book be the completed series, or is he going to be releasing more down the road? Well, right now, the book that's being released, Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, is all 3 stories that he's published. He said that he's probably going to write more Dunk and Egg in the future, but he hasn't given a timeline for that, so you're better off just buying this book. The problem with George R. R. Martin is he has great ideas, but he has so many of them that there's no way he's going to get to everything right away. Right now the priority is to get Winds of Winter done, and then maybe as he's finishing Dream of Spring, he might publish some more short stories as part of Dunk and Egg, or some other Song of Ice and Fire spinoff. So I'm not really expecting any more Dunk and Egg for at least another 3 or 4 years. Next question, Karen asks, in the books, Robb Stark legitimizes Jon and makes him his heir. Do you think that would happen on the show? Well, I think they kind of teased that with the Stannis plotline this year. I think that was the idea behind that. The sentiment in the books is a little bit different because Jon doesn't know anything about what Robb was planning. On the show, the choice is put to him directly by Stannis, so it's like a completely different emotional moment for him. So given his refusal of Stannis on the show, I'm not expecting to see that come up again. Honestly, I think that Sansa's going to be the one to take over Winterfell eventually. I know there have been a lot of rumors lately about Jon Snow having a battle with Ramsay Bolton, but even if that does happen and he ends up defeating Ramsay, I think he would cede control of Winterfell to Sansa, because he would have to go back to the Wall to defend it anyway. I think it'd be really impractical for him to take over the duties of ruling the North, just because he'd have so much political stuff to deal with, in addition to defending the realm against the White Walkers. There'd be a whole bunch of day-to-day stuff that he'd have to do, so I definitely think he would be very happy to pass that on to Sansa. Next question, Hannah asks, how do you think that HBO would set the tone for Dunk and Egg? Game of Thrones is so compelling because it's dark political drama with fantasy adventures on the side, but the adventures of a knight and a prince seem more light. Yeah, I definitely think that a Dunk and Egg TV series would be like a straight-up adventure story. The thing is that HBO would have to get people to buy into Game of Thrones knowing that there aren't any dragons. There weren't any dragons alive during the time of Dunk and Egg, so they'd have to find a way around that. There are plenty of big action sequences that they have. There's lots of tournaments. It's a much more traditional fantasy story, but part of the reason why people like Game of Thrones so much is because it's non-traditional. They probably end up using a lot of the same tricks to fix those things that the main TV show does right now. Like they drop certain characters from the books, they beef up smaller storylines in the books that they're associated with characters that they're focusing on. Like the show wouldn't just be about Dunk and Egg, and then they'd probably play up some of the drama between Aegon and his brothers, just because there's so many Targaryens alive at that time. But just in terms of framework, it would be less of a political show, more of just a straight up adventure narrative. Next question, Samantha asks, can you do a video on Tommen and Myrcella and what you think their fates will be on the show? Well, just to start with Myrcella, my initial thought at the end of season 5 is that she's dead. A lot of people are like, well, we didn't see her die. We don't know if they're going to have antidote available. Most of what the actress Myrcella has said after the fact makes it seem like she's definitely dead. Tommen is the big question mark right now, because a lot of people are wondering about the Valonqar prophecy, the Maggie the Frog prophecy that she heard. It made it sound like all of her children were going to wind up dead, and in the show it seems like it's slowly confirming that, but Tommen really isn't in a position of danger right now. It's really Marjorie and Cersei that are in trouble. So I think that Tommen is probably safe for the duration of season 6 at least. Next question, RG Bats asks, wait, was Egg murdered? So you're talking about Egg from Dunk and Egg. So Aegon V and almost his entire family died in a fire, like a mysterious fire at Summerhall. And a lot of people think that it was murder. There's no confirmation. Obviously, George R. R. Martin hasn't said yes or no either way. In the World of Ice and Fire book, it says that the fire had something to do with Aegon's desire to bring dragons back into the world. But the other really interesting tidbit is that Rhaegar Targaryen was born at Summerhall that same night. The really cool thing to speculate about, though, is if this has anything to do with some grand design, like Rhaegar Targaryen, firm believer in prophecies, King Aegon trying to bring dragons back into the world, and everybody goes up in flames on the same night that Rhaegar is born, in the same place. So maybe Rhaegar is a grand instrument of prophecy? My takeaway from all these mysterious circumstances is just that Rhaegar Targaryen is a very important person in the War of Ice and Fire, like the ongoing War of Ice and Fire. They're characters that are important during certain periods in time, like important to the growth of Westeros, and then above that are characters that are important on a cosmic level. So I think that Rhaegar Targaryen is just in that top tier of people. Next question, Addedalicious asks, what about George R. R. Martin's short story, The Ice Dragon? Could you please speak about that? Well, so it's actually a short story that he wrote before Song of Ice and Fire back in 1980. So it's not technically considered canon, but you could loosely consider it associated with stuff that happens in A Song of Ice and Fire. But don't take it as canon that ice dragons do exist. Usually when people are talking about ice dragons in Game of Thrones, they're talking about two different things. They're talking about this short story from 1980, and then they're talking about one of Old Nan's legends, which are two completely different things. The Old Nan legend is probably closer to bringing ice dragons into Song of Ice and Fire canon than the short story is. There's probably a certain amount of truth to every single story that Old Nan has told, but remember, legends get passed down from person to person, they get changed, they get interpreted in different ways. So like Ice Dragon could just be a metaphor for Jon Snow, being that he is probably part Targaryen. But for people that want to believe that there's an ice dragon trapped inside the wall, you're not wrong, like it hasn't been completely disproven. Just because we haven't seen it yet doesn't mean that it does not exist. So I'm not going to throw any water on any ice dragon theories or anything like that, I do think that it's more of a metaphor than an actual thing. Next question, Von B asks, I have an idea, what if the White Walkers are the First Men? Not the whole race, just the children and the First Men were at war, then they got a truce, but if some of the First Men didn't agree with the truce and some blood magic, yada yada. So you're saying, yeah, what if the White Walkers were part of humanity and they got twisted by magic? I do think that that's pretty likely. If White Walkers look so much like humanity, there had to have been a common ancestor at some point. And a lot of the ones we're seeing on the show right now are Craster's children that were sacrificed and then raised as White Walkers, just like we saw during season 4. So at some point in history, First Men were probably twisted by magic, and then they began the tradition of taking babies and twisting them and raising them as their own. But hopefully Winds of Winter, the very ominous sounding Winds of Winter, will shed some light on that. Like, where did they get started? What are some specific things about their culture that we haven't learned yet? Next question, Blade Coin asks, do you think that they actually killed Stannis in the show, since there are all these theories about why he wouldn't have died, and we didn't actually see it happen? So yes, we did not see it happen. George R. R. Martin has said that he's still alive in the books, but you have to remember, like, what's going on, where Stannis is in the books right now, completely different than what the show is doing. My takeaway from what happened to Stannis during season 5 was just that he was not the guy. He was the guy that thought he was the guy, and it turned out that was not the case. That's why Melisandre bolted. The look on her face said it all. Like, oh my god, I thought that he was this important person this whole time, and I was wrong. Think about how many chances Stannis has been given. Each time he just gets completely shut down. Another way to look at it too is that Game of Thrones, like the whole story, The Song of Ice and Fire, is about struggle and compromise. Stannis was not really great at compromise. Look at Jon Snow during episode 8. Like, had he been Stannis, he probably would have tried to stand his ground and they would have all been killed. So I do think that Stannis is dead on the TV show, and I think they're just opening up room for a new character to be that guy. But thank you so much for submitting questions, everyone. This is always a ton of fun to do. This is actually a big week. This is like the last week before a bunch of TV comes back, so keep your eyes peeled. Heroes and Gotham are coming next week. Doctor Who starts on Saturday, so I'll be doing videos for all that stuff. Congratulations to this week's giveaway winner, Robin Murray. You win a $20 Amazon gift card. Be sure to message me on the back end of my channel so I can get your contact info. And a lot of you guys have been requesting I do a bonus video for some of the Northern houses, so that's probably what I'm going to do for my next Sunday's bonus video. A little bit of Grand Northern Conspiracy, a little bit of background on some of the other Northern houses like the Karstarks and the Umbers. So just in case you guys missed it, you can click here for my Dunk and Egg video from yesterday. It's just a primer for the series. We can talk more about specific things whenever they actually release the book. And you can click here to catch up with Fear the Walking Dead from last night. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Let's high five. I'll see you guys tonight.